global trend is away from conflict towards cooperation. And in cooperation also we find conflict. Conflict is in the form of competition today, and that has got to be understood. And basically this competition is in the field of economics mainly. Economics activities ultimately lead to some kind of cultural dissemination. And cultural dissemination will ultimately lead to meaningful cooperation in the field of economics. So today our world is economic driven. Right? So the whole concept of security therefore has changed in a big way. And this started after the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, when for a moment a world called unipolar moment emerged in the political system of the world. After that, of course, we see a very different kind of a world where the drive is more towards cooperation and not towards the traditional concept of conflict that we have had in the past. Today we find cooperation in all its form. As I said to my students, cooperation means competition, and also it means conflict and competition. These things are essential in today's world. If you want to survive, as a third world country also, Pakistan has got to embrace this new concept of cooperation, conflict and competition. This has got to be understood. Once we understand that, then we'll be living in a much better world than the world we have seen in the past. Cold War followed by loose Cold War, and finally number of small limited wars that took place. Today, if you talk in terms of conflict and hard conflict, there are only two flashpoints. This is generally, there's a general consensus among scholars in the world. And those two flashpoints are Palestine and Kashmir. And they both are in the Muslim area. Therefore, the research of the Western scholars are a lot focused on the Muslim world today. And this is one thing we have got to understand. Conflict in the Muslim world is being very carefully observed and watched by the developed world. Most of the resources are also to be found in the Muslim world, which includes, oil is one of the major sources, one major capital. Other than the Muslim, human capital is also very, very important, which is developing fast in the Muslim world. We were left far behind in this race, but today we have picked up, and perhaps we now have begun to sort of recognize the significance of knowledge. If the world is knowledge based, if you want to be a rogue, for that too you have to be knowledge based. And the very good example is the nuclearization of the world. Nuclear weapon is a weapon of destruction, and everybody wants to keep that in their possession. Why do they want it? Because that acts as a deterrence, and deterrence helps you to avoid conflict. And this is the key concept today in the world. The basic flow is towards cooperation. This is how I look at it. Because we have already been exposed to the differences that we find in the world today. Cultural diversity is there, economic inequality is there, but every attempt is being made to sort of reduce this inequality in economic terms. Cultural diversity will live, and we have to live with it. That cannot be ignored. But when it comes to economic inequality, that can be done away with. And a very good example is the work of Thomas Piketty. If you look at his work, he has talked about it very clearly that inequality has got to be removed if you want to avoid violent conflict in the future. For that, you have to decrease the economic inequality that exists in our world. So the trend is towards cooperation and away from conflict, hard conflict. But that does not mean that hard conflict has gone away. No, it is there. The potentials are there, and that needs to be contained. And which I believe the major power have learned lesson from it, and they want to coerce us in a very different way. It is through soft power that they want to coerce us. Hard conflict is, the days of hard conflict, in my opinion, is over, and this is the trend in the world. This is how I look at it. It is more towards economic cooperation and less of hard conflict.
Kind of yourself.
Right.
The international political canvas in 2023 is going to be different. We would experience quite a lot of shuffling of certain traditional conservative values re-emerging. The rise of right-wing nationalism in many states of the world is going to be a problem that 2023 has to brace with. We can see the resurgence and the recovery for the COVID pandemic, how states will prefer to use the traditionalist realist paradigm to understand their natural resources and their requirements as a more fundamental requirement to a constructive engagement in the international community. As far as conflicts are concerned, the Russia-Ukraine conflict might linger on owing to how Russia's strategic inflexibility is directly connected to Ukraine's particular strategic necessity of surviving in a conflict. The polarization in Europe, as far as NATO's membership and enhancement is concerned, will continue to grow. I don't see the United States of America and China on an even keel, because USA would now, as far as its midterm elections and the results therein are concerned, would like to have a more stronger approach, because that is a more survivable route for their new administration that might take helm of affairs in 2024, because we may not see Xi Jinping and Joe Biden with the same rigor, vigor and valor with which they took charge of the offices when they resumed positions. For Pakistan and India, situation may remain the same. There is not much diplomatic activity anyways, but for Pakistan, the Western Front might take a more driving position as compared to the Eastern Front. The possibility of a meltdown in Afghanistan, or the possibility of a security meltdown in Afghanistan, is going to massively trigger Pakistan's concerns. The surgence of terrorist activities in the erstwhile FATA and the other regions of the KPK is a threat that Pakistan will have to plug next year forward. So NACTA and other agencies would have to work more efficiently, and I think the global canvas would be more realist than liberal constructivist in the days to come.
सर एक और आपका चाहिए होगा कि ये बाइडन की एक वीडियो सरफेस हुई है जिसमें वो कह रहा है कि ईरानी न्यूक्लियर डील जो है ना वो डेड हो चुकी है, तो इसके असरात आप किस तरीके से देखते हैं मिडिल ईस्ट की पॉलिटिक्स के ऊपर?
So I think Biden's statement, or in the light of his statement, the future for Iran or the nuclear deal with Iran rests solely on how Iran is able to manipulate its oil reserves in comparison to the recent shortage that has occurred due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So if Iran is able to put itself into a position where it can use its oil as a bargaining chip and is able to reintroduce or ask for a better deal than the one offered by the JCPOA, politics in the Middle East could turn out for the better, if not for the worse, for mainly three reasons. Middle East has so far been neglected in its position as anything more than an oil basket. The second is that the new regimes in the Middle East are more proactive in engaging on an economic scale rather than a military one. Saudi Arabia has had its adventure in Yemen, and I don't think they're willing to continue further down this line. And the third is that Iran is now in a more stable position to offer dividends to the international community, which is already deprived of natural resources of oil, maybe because the energy deficiency caused by certain restrictions on major oil producers, inaccessibility of major oil access points, and conflicts in major oil zones is going to surely put Iran on the driving seat again. So I think these three factors may be some of the major causes for concern for a more proactive approach for the Middle Eastern politics in the near future.
Kind of